Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, 5th Canto, Chapter 4, The Characteristics of Rishabhadev, Text 6. I'll just read the first line of the Sanskrit and we can chant the main part of the shloka. Yashaha Pandaveya Shloka Vudaharanti. Konu Tatkama Rajashe Nabe Anvacharet Puman Apatyatamagadyasya Harishuddena Karmana Konu Tatkama Rajashe Nabe Anvacharet Puman Apatyatamagadyasya Harishuddena Karmana Konu Tatkarma Rajashe Nabhe Anvacharet Puman Apatyatamagadyasya Harishuddena Karmana. Vaishnavis. Yasya, of whom, ha, indeed, Pandaveya, O Maharaj Parichet. Shloka, 2 verses. Udaharanti, recite. Ka, who, nu, then, tat, that, karma, work, rajarishe, of the pious king, nabhe, nabi, anu, following, acharit, could execute, puman, a man, apatyatam, sonhood, agat, accepted, yasya, whose, Hari, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Shuddhena, pure, executed in devotional service, Karmana, by activities. Translation: O Maharaj Parichet, to glorify Maharaj Nabhi, the old sages composed 2 verses. One of them is this: who can attain the perfection of Maharaj Nabhi? Who can attain his activities? Because of his devotional service, the Supreme Personality of Godhead agreed to become his son. Purport. The words Shuddhena Karmana are significant in this verse. If work is not carried out in devotional service, it is contaminated by the modes of material nature. That is explained in Bhagavad Gita. Yagyata karmano nyatra lokayam karma bandhana. Activities performed only for the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord are pure and are not contaminated by the modes of material nature. All other activities are contaminated by the modes of ignorance and passion, as well as goodness. All material activities meant for satisfying the senses are contaminated, and Maharaj Nabhi did not perform anything contaminated. He simply executed his transcendental activities, even when performing yajna. Consequently, he obtained the Supreme Lord as his son. Om Jnana-Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. The sages are glorifying Maharaj Nabhi. First of all, because of his activities, the way he lived his life. And secondly, because look at his son, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Rishabhdev, consented to become the son of Maharaj Nabhi. How did that sonhood of Rishabhdev, Lord Rishabhdev, come about? Maharaj Nabhi didn't have any children. He wanted a son. So the sadhus, the brahmanas, performed a yajna. And by their brahmana activities, which were focused on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they were able to actually attract the presence of the Supreme Lord to their yajna. This is Maharaj Nabhi's greatest fortune, that he had advisors of that caliber who could perform a yajna with such quality that the Supreme Personality of Godhead manifested. But these sadhus were a little embarrassed. My Lord, our Lord, we have disturbed you. We have called you from Vaikuntha to appear at this yajna just because Maharaj Nabhi wants a son. We're very embarrassed because of this. Maharaj Nabhi, he's like someone who approaches a rich man and just asks for a few grains. He obviously doesn't know what he's doing. We shouldn't be disturbing you in this way. The standard of pure bhakti is elucidated in the purport. Srila Prabhupada takes the opportunity to point out that an actual pure devotee doesn't want to disturb the Supreme Personality of Godhead just for his own darshan. I want to see, where are you? Just see how sublime this principle is. We think that the highest thing is to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But pure devotion, as demonstrated by Lord Chaitanya, means I may see you, I may not see you, but I am your servant eternally. You are my worshipful Lord, no matter what. Srimad Bhagavatam is a Rasa Shastra, and in the purports, Srila Prabhupada constantly brings out the ecstasies of pure devotion, as demonstrated by Lord Chaitanya. Maharaj Nabi wanted a son. In fact, why not? Why just a son? What about a son that's like the Supreme Personality of Godhead? This is not a pure desire. Lord Chaitanya teaches us, Mama janmani janmani svare bhavatad bhaktir. I don't want good family life. I don't want popularity. I don't want the results of punya, pious activities. In fact, I don't even mind taking birth again and again in this world as long as I have service to my worshipful Lord. Now the question is, since Maharaj Nabi's desire was a little embarrassing to the sadhus who arranged the yajna, why did the Supreme Personality of Godhead appear, and not only appear, but agree to become his son? The answer is the kindness of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He was not required to appear, and as the sages pointed out, it's not actually the ritual or the yajna procedures in of themselves that attracted the presence of the Supreme Lord. It was the bhakti. Nevertheless, out of humility, the sages felt embarrassed for themselves. Not only embarrassed because of Nabi wanting a son, but they presented themselves to the Supreme Lord as fruitive brahmanas. Brahmanas who are simply performing yajnas for elevation to the heavenly planets, for punya, as opposed to brahmanas who were pure devotees. They presented themselves humbly like that. Nevertheless, remember, because of their devotion, they were able to attract the presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Nabi wanted a son, and in one sense there's nothing unusual about that. He's a king. And eventually you're going to see that he fulfills his desire to retire from ruling, and both he and his wife go to Badarakashram. And there in Badarakashram, Maharaj Nabi joyfully performs austerities. That's always something to bear in mind about devotional service. We should not perform devotional service with a grudge. Why do I have to do this? Another day of this service, how long can I take it? No one is appreciating me, no one is recognizing me. I'm not in charge, so why do I have to do this? Like the materialists say, another day, another dollar. So similarly we can say, another day, more seva. And sometimes you hear devotees have an anxiety that you don't find in Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam. They come up with a very interesting concept that there could be such a thing as too much service to Krishna. Now, you haven't found any warning in Bhagavad Gita about too much service. And remember that by the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we are drowning in the flood of love of Krishna. So what is that flood of love of God? That flood of love of God means the flood of devotional service. So we want to drown. Now, The fact is, you have to apply yourself to devotional service with intelligence, but don't blame the service for our own shortcomings. We need to learn how to take care of ourselves while doing devotional service, how to maintain our health, maintain our sadhana. So any shortcoming in that department is usually our own fault. So we shouldn't take out our own shortcomings on devotional service. The problem was service. And the solution is quite obvious. Out goes the service, and then you have balance. No, we want to humbly admit that in the flood of devotional service set forth by Lord Chaitanya, we want to drown, but at the same time we have to learn how to cope with that flood. While drowning in that flood of devotional service, we want to learn how to navigate properly, how to swim, and so forth. So therefore, instead of moaning and groaning to Krishna, why all this service? We beg Krishna, please teach me how to deal with all this service. It's a completely different approach. So, remember, Maharaj Nabi and his wife, they went to Badarakashrama, and he joyfully performed austerities. Now just think, he's a king with power and majesty that nothing today can compare to. Yet he drops it all and goes to Badarakashram to perform austerities. Happily he does that. So that teaches us something about how we should perform devotional service. We should first of all be very eager for service, according to our capacity. Our ashram, the different ashrams perform devotional service in different styles, but still the yearning, the inner yearning is the same. When will I be an actual servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? When will I actually be a servant of the servant? The yearning, the hankering is the same in all the ashrams. In other words, the internals are the same, although the externals differ in style. Maharaj Nabi demonstrates by his attitude that he always wants to be immersed in bhakti. He's grateful for the opportunity. He's joyfully executing his service. Remember what Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita. Susukam kartam avyayam. Devotional service is joyfully performed. Our senses are joyfully engaged in the spiritual sense objects. We interact with the spiritual sense objects for Krishna's pleasure. Another thing to note in this verse today is the sense of wonder that the sages are expressing. We began to describe this. Who can attain the perfection of Maharaj Nabi? Who can attain his activities? We should always have this sense of wonder as we serve Krishna according to our style and capacity in the association of devotees. Every day should be a sense of wonder. Isn't it amazing that I have a chance to chant Hare Krishna? Isn't it amazing that I can render some kind of service to Krishna? Isn't that miraculous that I'm in the society of devotees, able to connect to the parampara and do some kind of service, whether it looks big or small. If we lose that sense of wonder, then that's a good sign that we're doing something wrong. Every day should be exciting. And we should always feel, I don't have enough time to explore all the wonders of bhakti. The ocean is bottomless. So a devotee should have that feeling of wondrously drowning in the ocean of bhakti. I'll never get to the bottom of this. I'll never master it. You see, the material world gives you the contaminated desire to want to master something. Like when you go to school and study something, I'm on top. I've got it all understood. Or it could be just some practical skill of maneuvering in the material world. I know how to travel. I know all the airlines. I can tell you the distance between the seat and the next seat in front of it. I can actually tell you that. Just see how expert I am. Every ashram has its potential for you're feeling expert, like you're on top of it all. So that sense of mastery, we feel entitled to that. It's a part of life, especially as you get older. You're not a foolish teenager anymore. You're not a dreamy person in your 20s. You have both feet on the ground, and you've seen it all, been there, done that. You've mastered life. But actually, a devotee is always a student. Just like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu presented himself. Guru More Mukhadik. My spiritual master said, I'm a fool. He chastised me and told me, just chant Hare Krishna. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is demonstrating how to always see oneself as a student, as a spiritual child in the presence of superiors. We want to feel that every day brings new experiences, new realizations. The glory of bhakti is such that you can look back at what you did last year, or you can look at your consciousness of last year and you're aghast. Oh, I was really out of it last year. Because you're always moving upward in bhakti. So even just the year before, you're amazed. How could I have been in such low consciousness? How could I have treated devotees in such a rough way or insensitive way? Or how could I have been so insensitive to Krishna's service and Krishna's sense gratification? How dull I was. So each year, you go on like that. Oh, last year, I just didn't know anything. I was so out of sync, so out of tune. So eternally, one feels that there is unlimitedly more Krishna consciousness to have. And our acharyas are actually doing service to make sure that you can see the ever-expanding ocean of bhakti. The 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan, they're always, as Srinivas Acharya describes, working to expand the limits of the ocean of bliss. Of course, the ocean of bliss is in of itself unlimited and infinitely expanding. But how do we see that? We see it through parampara. So by the service of the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan and their successors, we can actually get a glimpse of that ever-expanding ocean of Sevananda, bliss and service to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that sense of wonder is so precious for us. And we should think that if it's gone, what's going on? Maybe we've made some offenses to devotees. Maybe we're not attentive enough to perceiving what is in Krishna's interest, what is for Krishna's pleasure. Maybe our chanting has become inattentive and mechanical. You remember, perhaps, when you first came to bhakti, how everything was so amazing. Yes, you all remember. The first time you saw devotees, yes, they all looked so shining, effulgent. Remember? And then what happened? Familiarity. Oh, we see these Prabhus every day. Another day, another Prabhu. Who's going to give me a hard time today? Familiarity creeps in, and we lose that magic touch, so to speak. We lose that ability to see wonder everywhere. So therefore, we have to pray to Krishna, pray to the deities, pray to our spiritual master that I don't take anything for granted. It takes an effort. In the material world, because people are having such a hard time with relationships, they have a common saying that if you want a good relationship, you've got to work at it. Well, this is more so in relation to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and His service. But that work is actually blissful when we're trying to work on our service relationship. It's not agony. Bhaktivinoda Thakur reveals the full potential of working on that service relationship. He says, actually, any so-called troubles that I incur in the course of serving Krishna, those troubles are actually my greatest happiness. So he's revealing the full potential of the devotional attitude. We want to be mindful of the attitude by which we are engaged in devotional service. We certainly don't want to perform service with a reluctant or callous or insensitive attitude. Sometimes due to trying to perform spiritual life within the material world, we may incur some dullness. You have to be practical. You're in the material world. Material world means influences. You can't be innocent in this world. Things are happening all the time. Influences are swirling around you. Your very body and mind are composed of material influences. Be practical, understand your situation, and take the necessary steps to keep yourself sharp and sensitive. So therefore, a devotee is alert to his own attitude, her own attitude. Alert to see any familiarity, insensitivity, even any grudge creeping in. And let's face it, sometimes in the society of devotees, there are disagreements, misunderstandings, and one has to tolerate rather than get into a huff, get into a tizzy. Oh, that Prabhu, 20 years ago, he did that to me. 10 years ago, there was this situation in the Sangha of devotees, and I was falsely accused, or I was misunderstood. It seemed like one thing, but actually it was another. I still remember like it was yesterday. One of my godbrothers went through a bit of an ordeal, tough circumstances in the association of devotees, misunderstandings on both sides, his side and the other side, and it was a trying situation. And that was 30 years ago. But for him, it's still like yesterday, every time I discuss it with him. The hurt, the pain, he expresses it like it happened yesterday. And as a result of his not being able to let go of what happened 30 years ago, he hasn't performed any devotional service, and he stopped chanting Hare Krishna. And if you try to ask him, why don't you do this for Krishna? Why don't you do that? He said, first you have to understand what I went through 30 years ago. Well, we don't want to just laugh at that. We want, sometimes devotees, go through some ordeals, and it'll happen actually to every devotee. You'll be tested. Srila Prabhupada said that. Every devotee will be tested. So one has to learn how to move on. And a big part of moving on is begging to retain your sense of wonder so you don't become jaded and cynical. Sometimes older devotees can be a bit cynical, I've seen it all. I know. But I always point out that the best combination is the fresh enthusiasm of the new devotees and the mature wisdom of the older devotees. Both are essential. So again, we want to always retain the sense of wonder. Who can attain the perfection of Maharaj Nabi? Who can attain his activities? This verse is composed by old sages who've certainly seen it all and done it all. But still, they have that sense of fresh wonder. Not that, we've seen a lot of kings in our time. Yeah, he's going to Badarikashram. He'll probably fall down and come back to his throne. No, they're old sages, but they have such a sense of childish wonder. Just see the potency of bhakti. Just see this devotee. Because of his devotional service, the Supreme Personality of Godhead agreed to become his son. Now remember, at the yajna, the sages were embarrassed. Nabi's asking for a son. We're sorry that we brought about the presence of you, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, just because he wanted a son. He doesn't know what to ask for. But then there is the kindness of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is under no obligation to appear in any yajna, who doesn't need anything. He's purna kama. His desires are all full. Yet he came out of kindness for his devotee and agreed to be Maharaj Nabi's son. So that shows you the miracle of devotional service. It's not that Krishna is hard-hearted and just lets the devotee struggle to please him and he never reciprocates. Remember the case of Atri Muni in the 4th canto. He also wanted a son, and he offered a very vague and general prayer. Jagadishwar, who's ever in charge out there, I want a son. He didn't have any specific knowledge, but he knew at least that there is a Jagadishwar, controller of the universe. So it's like in sports, whatever kind of football, soccer, American football, or whatever, rugby, whatever. It's like you're desperate. You kick the ball in the air and say, well, someone please come get the ball. So basically that's what Atri Muni did. He just kicked the ball in the air. Okay, Jagadishwar, you're out there somewhere. Hope you get this ball. And what happened? Brahma, Shiva, and Vishnu appeared. Why 3? This is what Atri Muni was trying to figure out. I asked for thee, Jagadishwar, and now 3 personalities have appeared. Which one of you is the top one? But the 3 personalities, the Gunavatars, are being honest. Because in one sense, each of the 3 Gunavatars could be considered Jagadishwar. Brahma actually creates the world. Vishnu maintains, Shiva destroys the world. So they all three honestly appeared. So then Atri Muni got the benediction of a son who was some kind of expansion of each one of the three Gunavatars. From Vishnu came a planetary expansion, Dattatreya. And from Brahma came not a Vishnu Tattva expansion, but a Jiva, Soma. And from Shiva came Durvasa Muni. So again, in the purports, Prabhupada points out that Atri Muni was not a pure devotee. He had a material desire. He didn't want, or he didn't ask for a son who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He asked for a son like the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He wanted such a son. Naturally, that would be a feather in his cap. That would be quite a nice son to have from the viewpoint of material consideration. Yeah, give me a son like the Supreme Personality of God. So that's a material desire. Nevertheless, although the desire was not the best, still, he was reciprocated with in such a way that indeed, because there's no one like the Supreme Personality of Godhead, a planetary expansion of Vishnu became his son. So what are we to make of this? There seems to be a gap here. On the one hand, on the one side, there's the devotee and the imperfect desires of a devotee. And on the other side, there is the kindness of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So obviously, we are not left in a hopeless situation. This gap in bhakti can be reconciled, or it can be dealt with by the kindness of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. You see, these devotees, both in the case of Nabi Maharaj and Atri Muni, they were practicing. They were very focused. They were very dedicated. So it's not that all their dedication and focus and spiritual practice was overlooked. They just want a son like me. Forget them. It could be that we have this conception that this is the kind of Krishna we're dealing with. Although we're followers of Krishna's Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who just gives everything away, nevertheless, if we have a little bit of tough time in bhakti, we develop a real attitude. You don't know what happened to me 30 years ago. You don't know how I was treated. If you actually knew, then you'd understand why I'm not chanting today, why I'm not doing any service today. It all makes sense, but you don't understand. We are followers of Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda, who are giving away the whole store. Yet somehow or other we have this idea that Krishna is cold and callous and not sensitive to our plight. Remember Krishna's self-defense. Yes, sometimes the Supreme Personality of Godhead has to defend himself. Like in a courtroom. The gopis actually took him to court. What kind of lover are you? We'd like to ask you some questions. We'd like to interrogate you. Krishna, please take the stand. Now, there are various types of lovers. What type are you? So bear in mind, while they're questioning Krishna like that, they're massaging his feet, massaging his hands, and they're looking into his eyes, and some of them are trying to conceal their hurt pride and jealous anger, all on the spiritual platform, of course, without a taint of material energy. So it's in that way that they're posing those famous questions to Krishna. What kind of lover are you? And in answering, Krishna explained that I can seem like I'm neglecting my devotee, but actually I'm doing that to increase the devotee's focus upon me. I'm doing that to increase the devotee's devotion. So this happens in two ways. The acharyas point out that Krishna's apparent neglect of a devotee is shown towards those aspiring prema bhaktis, devotees who are trying to become purified and reach the stage of perfection. And this treatment applies to the actual prema bhakti, those who are already full and perfect in their attachment to Krishna. So for those who are aspiring to be real devotees, full devotees, Krishna can seem to be gone from them, so that they will think, just see how useless I am, just see how contaminated I am. I have failed to get the mercy of Krishna. Just see how much more progress I need to make. So in that attitude, the humility increases. And then through that humble self-introspection, in which the devotee feels, I've just not attained Krishna due to my own faults. I have not a drop of his mercy. That purifies the devotee of lust and anger. And in this way, actually, Krishna has done a favor to bring the devotee closer to him by apparently what seems to be neglect. So that's the first part of Krishna's defense. Yes, the first type of devotee is the practicing devotee. I may seem to neglect that devotee, but there's a reason behind it. Then the second part of Krishna's defense refers to those actually established in pure love of Krishna. Why does Krishna seem to disappear from them? To increase their attachment. They're already attached, but Krishna wants to give the mercy of increasing the attachment. And for those kind of devotees, in the perfect category, Krishna uses that example that someone's poor all their life and gets big money and then loses every penny. They never stop thinking about what they lost. I don't know if you've ever met someone like that. I know someone who had a fortune of $10 million, and in the financial crash of 2008, lost everything. It's a very special situation. We were explaining in Mayapur some days ago how social scientists have discovered something that contradicted a long-held belief, that social unrest, social upheavals are caused by the dispossessed, the low class, the proletariat, the poverty-stricken. They're the ones who are going to turn everything upside down. They don't have anything. They have no hope. Sometimes it is said about India that because such a